Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar that shares our learnings on how to successfully integrate mobile into your workflow. Now, everyone knows that mobility, if not already, will soon be a reality in your daily routine. In fact, the vast majority of business leaders believe employees cannot effectively do their jobs without a smartphone. However, people attending this webinar can probably attest that maintenance-related work hasn't quite caught on to this mobile trend as quickly as other departments. Now, we're not here to talk about the importance of integrating mobile into your workflow. That's clear. That's been proven. Instead, today we want to discuss how to avoid being a part of the astounding 2/3 of asset-intensive organizations who waste time, energy, and resources into a failed mobile implementation. My name is Derek Schickel, and with me to run the show today is Brian Hying, our functional consultant, who will be discussing these topics in depth and showing us some functionality examples that will help guide you in your journey to mobility. Thanks for everyone that's able to join us live today. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to ask questions using the chat function of this webinar. We'll get to all the questions we can during the demonstration and the presentation, and we'll also have some time for Q&A at the end. Now, before we get started, for those that aren't familiar with us, we are Prometheus Group. We have been in the business for over 20 years and are headquartered here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we're running this webinar. But of course, we have a strong global presence. Our mission is to simplify and streamline enterprise asset management and to optimize maintenance and operations through the use of integrated and intuitive software. We are pleased to count the most successful asset-intensive corporations across multiple major industries as Prometheus Group partners. This slide provides just a glimpse of some of those incredible companies that trust us here at Prometheus Group to streamline their maintenance and operations. You'll see oil and gas, chemical, pulp and paper, mining and metals, utilities, food and bev, all major industries represented here in just a small snapshot of the Prometheus family. Now, before we dive in, I want to present the bigger picture. Now, there's 6 modules of the Prometheus platform that can help you achieve those world-class goals in all areas of asset management. So what is the Prometheus platform? The Prometheus platform is a gateway for information to flow from different groups in your organization, be it projects, operations, maintenance, safety, turnaround, etc. All of this data also integrates directly with your ERP system to keep a single source of the truth. Here at Prometheus Group, we offer unparalleled integration between these different modules of our platform to ensure consistency and transparency of data across all these different groups. Today, we'll be focusing on the mobile portion of the platform, which in itself spans multiple areas of the platform. So keep in mind the interconnectivity and the seamless integration across all these different modules. Now with that, we'll turn it over to the star of the show, Brian Hying.
Thank you, Derek. So as he mentioned, my name is Brian Hying. I'm a functional consultant here with Prometheus Group. And to start out the webinar today, I really want to discuss what a successful roadmap looks like when you think about integrating a mobile application. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, and these are a lot of the key points that we review with our customers and that we see just in the industry in general as being important as you look at that mobile application integration. So in walking through these, I'm going to kind of give a high-level overview, and then we'll really drill into a couple of these going forward and what some of the differentiators are in the marketplace when you think about looking for mobile applications. So starting at the top is diagnosing your pain points. This is pretty straightforward, but ultimately, what are you trying to solve and for whom? Right? Is your process to report issues complex or time-consuming? Is there wasted time discussing the work or who's going to do it at the beginning of the day? Are your actual time entries inaccurate? Right? Identifying these pain points is critical, but also understanding who the actual mobile users will be as well is going to be just as important. In diagnosing those pain points, it's extremely critical on the front end to know what you're trying to solve when you start to think about the mobile integration. The second point, get in early with an industry expert. So let's be honest, when implementing any new technology, it can definitely seem daunting. Right? When you're talking about a single plant or multiple plants, knowing where to start or how to go about it, you may not necessarily have that expertise within your own organization. And identifying who needs to be involved and how you would roll that out are important questions that need to be answered that sometimes are often overlooked within even our own customer base or prospects that we talk to when thinking about that mobile integration.
Absolutely. And with these two pain points, there's a commonality between them, and that is the personnel involved. Oftentimes we see as people that have been training and helped with implementation with Brian and myself, people stop right before asking the question of who are the users and who needs to be involved. We focus too much on what it is, not the personnel involved. So it's important to keep that in mind as you go throughout the journey.
Yep. And ultimately, the right partner, when you think about this, is going to take the time to learn your business, help you develop a methodology and a game plan for execution. And that's going to be extremely crucial as you go through the additional steps through this roadmap. So the third item, map it out. So your mobile asset strategy is critical. This is what's going to help drive towards your organizational goals. And with a better plan, you'll get there more quickly, more efficiently, and more cost effectively without really hitting any challenges or roadblocks. So we'll dig into this one in a little bit more detail, but obviously having that plan mapped out is going to be extremely beneficial there. In addition to that, securing top-down support. So management needs to be at the wheel when it comes to mobile adoption, making it clear to the organization that mobility is the direction that you're headed. From our experience, in organizations that are looking to take on a mobile application for maintenance and operator roles, those roles, the individuals within those roles are very, very good at what they do. And they already have a process for the way that they would do it today. And so having a mobile application come in can sometimes disrupt that. So it's important to have management buy-in and continued communication to help, first of all, show them how this can benefit them. And it's a lot easier user adoption and a more successful user adoption for those employees in those roles.
Absolutely.
Moving on, getting everyone on board, right? So that kind of goes along with the management support. So rollouts are only successful when everyone is clued in and involved. So not only is that just end users, management, that's also your IT team, right? They're going to have an important part of rolling it out and then also supporting it going forward. So as long as you have that conversation and have them a part of the conversations with your mobile application vendor early, that's going to be important because it'll make the deployment much more of a success there. They'll also start to provide a basis for, again, knowing what that network architecture looks like for your organization, and really help you understand, are we better off starting this with a pilot or doing a complete rollout? So in our experience, doing a pilot is very, very common because what that allows you to do is, first of all, see it in action. You can get some excited users to learn how to use it best in their roles. But then you can also take those lessons learned and use that across the entire implementation. So having that support throughout the process is extremely beneficial.
Absolutely. And the feedback loop at this stage is also of utmost importance. When we talk about those pilot users, or even if you do an overall rollout, getting the feedback and acting on it makes those users feel heard, but also nobody knows about what's going to make the app more usable or a mobile device more usable than the people using it themselves, the end user. So it's important to close that feedback loop consistently.
Absolutely. Now moving on from there, don't forget about training. So now that you have everyone on board, you have that implemented, you have IT involved, end users, management, don't forget about training through the implementation process. So a really good mobile application doesn't need a lot of training. If you think about your smartphone today, you're probably downloading applications that you use that you have no one training you on. And that's exactly what you're going to be looking for from a maintenance and operations type application as well. However, to get the most use out of it, you want to provide some level of training just so they know how it can impact their specific roles and functions from a day-to-day basis. What might change about their processes, how this will benefit them, and potentially why they should care, right? They already have their processes, so how is this going to benefit them? So you incorporate that into the training program so that it's not just here's how to use it, but here's why it's beneficial. Here's some more background for our organization on why we're going this way, and these are the benefits that we're looking to see out of this.
Exactly. Brian brings up a good point in the sense that when you download an application from the App Store, I didn't receive training when I downloaded LinkedIn or ESPN or my social media apps. You don't receive training for that because they're intuitive, and that's the same type of mentality you want to take if you're designing the application. However, you're likely changing business processes. In a lot of instances, you're introducing new hardware to users that have never used that hardware. So it's really important, as Brian mentioned, not to forget about the training side.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a couple of different ways to think about the training while we're here, right? There's obviously, with the vendor that you choose, you can lean on them or have them support all the training requirements. And that's completely acceptable. But even for some of the bigger rollouts, again, a lot of times what we see and really support quite a bit is the ability to train super users who will then go out into your organization and continue to train, right? Because they have bought in, they understand it. And it's also a point of reference for the users to lean on going forward if they do have any questions or concerns. Which kind of leads into the tracking progress, right? So you've gone through the implementation, you've done the training. Now it's time to understand if your organization is actually overcoming those challenges you originally wanted to overcome. And whether that's changes in downtime, accuracy of data, tracking the preventative versus reactive maintenance, or really any other key metrics. It's going to be important to step back and look at how you're tracking against your original goals going into that. And ultimately, reviewing that data is going to provide better insight into your organization to understand what actions you can take to continue to move towards those goals. And then once you start to understand how things are trending, where you're starting to see the most benefits, where you're starting to see the return on investment, because ultimately that's probably what's going to be driving the implementation is the return on investment for our employees. But you're also going to want to follow up with them, because being users out in the field, they're going to know what's working and not working. Again, having that line of communication. They're going to know how they could potentially change some of these things to make it more useful or more beneficial to the team. And so there's a lot of lessons learned that you might see at a site, but again, having that super user group, they can share those lessons learned across the organization very quickly. So again, just because you're starting to, even if you are seeing successful KPIs, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily done with that that integration of the mobile application, because you can continue to build on that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how easily you should be able to make those changes rather than taking that feedback and making those changes fairly quickly. Has or continues to build a lot of buy-in from those users, rather than if it were to take several months or even a year to implement some of those changes. So in conclusion, really, when you follow these deliberate strategic steps, the success of the mobile application and the mobile integration increases exponentially, right? So having this roadmap and each of these steps followed very closely definitely helps the success of that mobile integration.
Yeah, even missing one of these very important key topics in a mobile integration it's a fast track to becoming one of those 2/3 of the failed mobile implementations. So it's important to take these seriously.
Absolutely. So now that we've kind of looked at things from a high level, I really want to start to drill into some key points here where, again, whether we see the most challenges or where some of those failures can really happen. So when thinking about the mobile application and identifying the needs, right, a part of that is through identifying those requirements. So at the very top level, what type of system integration are you looking for with your mobile application? Right, so there's some easy answers there, right? First of all, maybe it's your SAP system, maybe it's Maximo, Oracle, N4, right? There's a ton of CMMS systems in the market, and that's typically the foundation of your integration system. But what we see is, just because you have enterprise asset management system, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily linked to your financial system, or it's not necessarily linked to your material database, or there's a lot of other cases that we see out there that maybe internally can seem complex or convoluted, but with a good mobile application, you can make that integration pretty seamlessly. So they don't have to go to multiple applications; they can just use a single one and send information back to those databases. So that goes along with the other supporting systems, and even I added the GIS in there. That's a really important one. We have a lot of customers that are already using GIS, but we continue to have more conversations around how that can be incorporated into the mobile application, right? Because people want to better understand how to be more efficient from a time management perspective, and not even necessarily across a big area, right? A lot of times you think, oh, this must be for someone that covers an entire state or a region per se. But even from the aspect of how do I better optimize my routes inside of my own plant, rather than going from the first floor to the fifth floor to the second to the third to the first again, right? How do I optimize that? And that can definitely be a part of that mobile business requirements and implementation.
Absolutely. As Brian mentioned, we have plenty of our users that do have the GIS technology in place, but the GIS realm in general is a very booming area of technology right now, and so you may not have GIS at your plant or at your locations right now, but it's important to consider the mobile application would be able to integrate with that in the future. Does it have the framework? Does it have the architecture to integrate with technology like that down the road to avoid a reimplementation?
Absolutely, yeah. And just to kind of, again, show you what I'm referring to from that system integration perspective, I want to show you a couple examples of how we're able to do it from a Prometheus group perspective. So as we look at the Prometheus mobile applications here, these are Windows-based that I'm showing right now. I'm going to show a iOS-based application here shortly as well. But you'll notice that here I have very specifically a home screen that is connected to SAP. Okay, so again, if you're a user of Maximo, N4, Oracle, JD Edwards, right, the terminology might be slightly different, but we will start to see, regardless of that back-end system, it's a very similar user experience, because even a lot of times what we see too is that even through acquisitions, companies are having multiple asset management software systems or CMMSs, and it's not always an easy transition. So having a similar look and feel can help that transition as you look to acquire or integrate multiple sites. So this is an example of a SAP platform. So again, you can see that I have my home screen filled out based off my workflow here. So I have create notification, create work order. But if I were to move over to this other system, you can now see that this is actually connected to Maximo. Okay, so very similar look and feel. Terminology is going to be a little bit different. So here it's create work order, create service request. But again, that's because the back-end system is different. It's a completely different system. But ultimately, what I want you to recognize is having the ability to connect to multiple systems is key, because you don't know what your future holds, right? You don't want to necessarily delay projects just because the potential of moving to a new system in 5 years is there. You can start to realize benefits today, and then with the right mobile application, integrate that into a new system going forward.
We see that all the time with just the nature of the industries we work with. Refineries get purchased, acquisitions are made, chemical plants, whatever it may be. That it usually requires a change in the back end that Brian's talking about here. But again, as he mentioned, just to emphasize, having the same user experience as these changes take place is of utmost importance and can be a huge asset to the changeover as you're undertaking a major project like an acquisition.
Yep. Now, in digging into the applications themselves a little bit further to kind of show a lot of the needs and capabilities that our customers are looking for and that we've had a lot of conversations around. Right, I've put several bullet points here. We're not necessarily going to go through all of those today, But a lot of times work identification and work execution is sort of the foundation, regardless of the employee, whether it's maintenance, operations, management, right? If you're walking through different parts of your facility, you're going to identify a potential issue that should be reported. And providing someone an easy way to do that is extremely important, and you can do that through the mobile application.
Yeah, we see that too, quite often on site, or even just talking to individual users pre-mobile. If I'm a user, if I'm a mechanic, an electrician going to my job, and I happen to see a belt slipping or something vibrating a little more, something that made a little weird noise, if I have to go all the way back to the maintenance office, or I have to go back to a kiosk and log into SAP or Maximo or whatever it may be, I'm tempted to not have heard that sound or not have seen that vibration, which of course leads to an unreliable and an unsafe plant. So when you take away the excuse, give it to them, as one question here we see coming in alludes to, giving that on an iPad, on an iPhone. We absolutely want to have this technology available on any mobile platform, Android, iOS, or Windows. So hopefully that answers the question that came in. We appreciate it. But again, it's about taking the excuse away, making it easy for your users to do the right thing.
Yeah, and that's actually a good segue for the next conversation, because as I think about these features and capabilities, I kind of want to show the flexibility, but also the ease of use here. So I'm going to walk through a work identification scenario here, because there's several components. It's one thing to identify that, or it's one thing to recognize that, oh, we need a better way to identify work. But what does that actually mean? When you really drill into it, what does doing that in a better way actually mean? And so I wanted to show that here. So I flipped back and forth between a couple different systems. And again, you'll notice that this looks very similar. What I'm showing now is actually an iPad. So the first two were a Windows device. I'm now showing it on an iPad, and we also support Android operating systems as well. But this is just a regular iPad here with our mobile application on it. So again, similar look and feel to what the other systems had looked at. But to further clarify that work identification, I'm actually just going to create a notification here to kind of walk you through that. So a much more simplified view of the potential information that I could fill in, right? Based off of the asterisks, I know what's going to be required for me to submit this. So we'll always align with what your CMMS requires, but from here we can either just minimize it to those core fields, or we can add or request additional information from those users. So in this particular case, I want to walk through again how I'm going to be building that work identification piece, in this case a notification. So there's a couple different fields here that you can see that we require based on the asterisk. So in this case, I've identified a leaky pump, so I'm going to submit that back. Now, when we also think about best uses or what benefits are we getting out of the mobile applications, an extremely large piece of that is accuracy of data. Right? So not only are we now at the source of the issue filling some of these things out, but there's also technologies that we can leverage to ensure that my data is accurate, right? So what pump is leaking? Well, I may not be an expert in this area, but I still want to fill it out. Well, if you're using barcoding technologies, you can see here that now I can start to barcode or scan that equipment. So there's no question on what it is. So I'll go ahead and scan my barcode here, and it's going to tell me what that equipment is. So again, with that equipment accuracy or data accuracy, there's several components within each of these steps that you can leverage to ensure that that is correct.
And one thing too, as he's going through entering this notification, you'll notice that, if you're an iPhone user, you notice the iOS inherent keyboard, you notice the iOS inherent spinner menus. It's really important when thinking about a mobile application to consider things like that. Cross-platform development is something that we are putting at the top of the priority list to make sure that Android users have the expected experience of drop-downs and checkboxes, where iOS users have the experience of spinner menus and slider buttons. So just something to keep in mind for user adoption and making the application intuitive to users of certain technologies if you already have it implemented in your plant.
Yep. And so to continue on that conversation of data accuracy and benefits of mobile applications, the other piece too is now that I'm in the field identifying this work, having the ability to take a picture is also extremely huge. So you can see now here I have my attachments. So I can go ahead and take a photo. I'm going to take a photo of my barcodes here, just as a quick snapshot. But again, a picture is truly worth 1,000 words out in the field. And so having that picture, because maybe I didn't describe it correctly, but rather than the planner having to get up, go to that piece of equipment, walk across the plant, right now we're talking about time efficiency. Not only data accuracy now, but time efficiency for all users. As a technician in the field, I didn't have to walk back to the kiosk to enter this information. As a planner, I don't have to walk to that piece of equipment to identify the issue in further detail so that I can scope it out and create a work order for it.
You think about how easy it is to misnumber a piece of equipment when you have to walk back. Every step you take, it increases the likelihood that you're going to put the wrong equipment number on there. That notification gets processed. It gets walked down. It just destroys wrench time, destroys planning time, and time that could be spent making other improvements to your reliability and maintenance program.
So I went ahead and saved that just for today's conversation. But so you can see that I've gone ahead and created that that notification there. So I have my notification number. But the next topic I kind of want to talk about is really from the work execution side. You can now see that in creating this, again, I have in this notification now various attachments associated with it, specifically that picture. So if I ever needed to come back and reference this, that is going to be available to me or whoever's using that out in the field. Now, again, I showed how to do this on an iPad here, but if I jump back to the Windows device, again, really had to pay attention to detail just because it does look very similar there. And there's a lot of benefits to that we'll dig into a little bit later. But now I'm looking at this from a different perspective. So if you remember, the next topic is really on that work execution. So now that I've identified work, now I'm going to go out and execute that work. Whether that means it's an operator round, I'm actually a mechanic doing some repair work, I'm doing preventative maintenance. How do I have access to that, and what type of view of that information do I have? So here I have my work list, right? So now I'm looking at all the work orders assigned to me. So if you have a really good planning and scheduling team, right? Now as a technician in the field, I just need to open up my mobile application and view my assigned work. Okay? And even if you didn't have that scheduling process, you could very easily just switch to see, well, I'm just going to view the plant work list, right? I just need to go out and see what is with the plant, and I can pick and choose my own operations. And we have a lot of customers that do it both ways. There's no right or wrong reason or right or wrong way to do this. But again, having the flexibility in the mobile application to be able to support those options is obviously critical.
That's exactly right. We see a lot of implementations fail when an application is selected that requires a new business process. Everyone on the call knows how difficult it is to implement a new business process, and this flexibility is of utmost importance when talking about having an application that adheres to your business process rather than having it be the other way around.
So again, I am in that particular operation here, and so in looking at the item details now, this is what we would consider a work execution screen. This is where I'm going to start to go out and leverage the information that is in our system to execute on that work and submit any information back that I want them to know about the work that I did. So in this particular case, it's giving me some general information, right? I can't edit it because I'm executing the work. But more importantly, I have the documentation here at my hands to go out and view what I need to complete that work. So as I drill into the attachments, you'll start to see here that I have standard papers that come from the CMMS itself. Again, whether that's Maximo, SAP, Oracle, whatever that might be, I start to get that documentation. But any additional documentation that might be of benefit for me to go out and complete that. Right, so I have that in my hands to go out and complete that work. So in this case, here's my my shop paper with all that information that I can now leverage to go out and complete that work, or any other supporting documentation, right? Think of owner's manuals, diagrams, engineering drawings, things like that. Now at my hands, you don't have to print them off. They can be available out in the field. And from a lot of conversations that I've even had recently what I've started to see too is that, maybe a mobile application is chosen based on it having the ability to provide a certain level of information, right? But it's often overlooked that, okay, I now have the work order information, but what if I want attachments that aren't held inside of Maximo as an example? Well, do I need another application for that? So it's important, again, on that front end to identify your pain points, but then also recognize where maybe you need to fill in the gaps to make sure that you're able to provide those users the right resources.
And one thing while we're on this note, and apologies in advance to Brian if I'm going to steal his thunder, but I do want to talk about connectivity and offline functionality, because a question did come in about that, and we are seeing the questions. Keep them coming. These are great. Good connectivity could be important, but to be completely honest, when selecting an application, for example, the Prometheus mobile application does not depend on having full connectivity. That's also important as well. You're going to get a lot of pushback from your tradesmen if they can't sync with Maximo, with SAP, with whatever they're connecting to. And with this particular Prometheus mobile application, we put offline functionality, again, at the top of the list for prioritization. So users often don't know when they go offline because of the way the application intelligently caches and syncs things to the device, including those attachments that Brian just pulled up on the local application. So to answer another picture as well, during this response, the pictures can be stored wherever you currently store your pictures, whether it's a current shared drive or locally with Maximo and SAP. But connectivity is important to take into consideration, but just know that the user experience does not change with online or offline mode. And we'd love to talk more about this offline functionality in a more tailored demonstration, so just reach out, let us know. But last thing I'll say on the topic is this is the name, this is the application being used in underground mining today. So I can't really think about a more disconnected environment than an underground mine. So.
Right. No, and you do bring up a good point, because that's also a part of those business requirements that you're going to have, right? So we've talked about some of those work procedures as far as not only do I just have maybe the owner's manual or the equipment manual at my hands, but I also might want the work procedure as far as step 1, open cabinet, step 2, check for energized components, right? Having those work procedures in various industries is extremely critical, and it has a lot of paper to it. So incorporating that into your mobile application is extremely valuable as well. Same thing with reliability and measurement points. And, as Derek kind of alluded to, more of the device compatibility and the mobile application technologies, right? Online and offline. So in talking about the application technologies themselves, some of the other options I've seen in the industry, include HTML5 or natively written apps. Some of the challenges with HTML5, right, is that it doesn't necessarily size correctly to the device always. Also, when you think about online and offline functionality, that's extremely critical. And so, even myself have had questions around, well, when your application goes offline, what happens if it's in the middle of a sync? And it's kind of interesting because we just don't have that problem. If it's in the middle of the sync, it just picks up where it left off, where, again, the HTML5 technology isn't as clean or crisp with that. And so you really need to make sure that you're choosing the right application for the environments that you're going to be working in. Okay. Now, a couple other things here too, right? I had shown you iOS and a Windows device. We do support Android as well. And those are a lot of the common ones out of the field, right? But don't necessarily think of it as a mobile application per se either, right? So a lot of times it might be a tablet, might be a tough book, might be a cell phone. So those can all be incorporated into that device compatibility. But also, a lot of times, companies are forced to standardize on a specific operating system. Prometheus does things a little bit differently. We don't necessarily require you to standardize on that operating system. We can easily support all three because, again, we do have and see out in the industry that companies are going to a bring your own device model where, the employee brings the device and they're reimbursed X amount of dollars per month, right? So rather than providing devices, you can also switch that model very easily. But again, defining that requirement up front and knowing that is extremely important. Okay. Now, so far, we've talked about the functional side. We've talked about the high-level roadmap and the functional side for what the users can expect, or what we would want the users to have, which is obviously extremely important because that's who is going to benefit the most out of this. But we don't necessarily always just want to focus on the end user here as well. There's another big player, a part of your team, that's going to have some buy-in in this mobile application. And I'm really referring to your IT organization or admins or team leads or super users, right? So not only do we just want to make sure that the application itself is a good fit for the end users, but you're also going to want to make sure the back end is a good fit for your IT architecture and network, and make sure that you have the resources available to support that, right? Yes, there is support available for certain levels, but making sure that you choose an application that's easily administrated through your organization is extremely valuable as well. When you think about what that looks like from an application perspective, right, the configuration, the scalability, those all play into it. And, so understanding what benefits you can get out of the different development models can be extremely valuable.
And that's extremely important what he mentioned. And I, just thinking about this last night, we're dealing with a new internet service provider. The front end experience of people getting connected, of people being able to access the internet is great. When I go to administer anything about it, they definitely did not think about me. They definitely did not think about the network guy sitting on the other end of it trying to change the password, because the module for that was not well thought out. What we want to make sure is that it's not just an end user ease of use application, but the administrators also have that intuitive front end, have the flexibility, and have the appropriate resources and intuitiveness in the background of the application itself. So we want to take a twofold approach when we're talking about our Prometheus mobile application.
Right. Yep. And so just to kind of show that a little bit too, from a configuration perspective, because there's really kind of two different ways to think about it. We see a lot of applications out there that are developed and customized to customers' processes. So it's great in the sense that, you get what you need from that perspective. But if you need to make a change, if you go through the implementation process and maybe you're getting different feedback from the users than you originally expected, or than the original feedback they gave you, to go back and make those changes, you now need to either have a developer on staff or have, spend additional costs on developing that application further. To where if you have more of a configurable application, that can help on both sides. First, on ease of use on the setup, but on the back side, if any changes need to be made, you can quickly make those changes that they can recognize very quickly. So to kind of show you an example of what that configuration could potentially look like, I wanted to show the Prometheus admin configuration manager here. So again, this is web-based, but it does control the screens on our mobile application, okay? So again, you'll notice that I'm not developing or writing code. It's a very intuitive interface where I can start to configure the mobile application rather than develop and customize the application. So right now, from the main menu, you can see there's various areas. I'm going to really focus on the screens and the groups here, just because that's typically where you see the most interest. But as I want to create a screen, so I'm going to be looking at my create work order screen. The first thing we're going to do is look at the actual layout itself. So here are the various fields in my create work order screen, okay? And all I did to create this was drag and drop the various fields over into the mobile application, or into the mobile screen. So all I did, again, I have my set of fields over here, pulled them. I can remove other fields from this particular screen. And so when you look at the mobile application, what this is actually going to do for us, as I go back to my create work order screen here, you'll now see that all those fields, right, have come through, and I can mix and match or configure or set up this particular screen however that particular group or individual user wants to see their information. And so the importance of this is obviously there's a lot of aspects of the importance of this. Number one, you don't want to fill their screen up with essentially useless fields, right? I only want to give them the basics for what they have to fill out, and I can do that here very easily. And from a setup perspective, right, we bring over all the core fields inside of your Create Work Order screen, but then we can also bring over user-defined fields or user exits or different things like that based off of your requirements and information you want to see.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point and helps me answer one of the questions that came in about the question was, what does the malfunction confirmation button do? A button that you saw on a screen a few minutes back. And hopefully this provides some clarity that it depends on what that button does in your CMMS. It depends on what is that field in your CMS. Even if you have custom fields, we have no problem mapping those over because of that connection we achieve with your CMMS. So in this case, the malfunction is just a way to identify additional reliability information on an object. But again, that's not the important thing. The important thing is that it aligns with what your CMMS is doing.
Yeah. And along with that, what we find too is in CMMSs, the terminology can sometimes be kind of funky. It doesn't always make sense.
Right.
It doesn't always align with what you think it should be. And so we would have the ability to change that. If you use if your system uses the term notification, but you want to use service request, we would have the ability to translate that field name to whatever you would like it to be.
And again, walking us right into answer these questions as they're coming in. I know we're skipping a couple, but we'll address those. Multi-language support, absolutely. So Brian mentioned translating fields to be different values based upon the nomenclature of your CMMS. But of course, that lends in, first of all, out-of-the-box core functionality languages, but also the additional, you have any languages that may not be supported by SAP, supported by Maximo. That flexibility allows us to work with quite literally any language on the planet, as long as we have the input for the non-core languages.
Right, exactly. And so to kind of build out this screen a little bit further, right, I'm showing very simply one screen and one interface here, but there's other things that we can start to do, right? When you start to want to incorporate actions, whether you're going to add a task list or job plans or bill of materials or different things like that, right? How do we start to build these things out? And so, again, depending on your workflow, we're able to incorporate that into the screen builder here so that you have that drop-down, drag and drop functionality to create these. No longer need a developer, from an admin, even a super user level, you can come in and make these changes. So the next item I just want to show you real quick on our admin configuration manager here is, here's how I have grouped mine out for my particular plant. So you can see I have electricians and different level of electricians, right? So I might want to have the team lead view everyone's work, and I might only want electrician ones to see work that's been assigned to them, or have the ability to only create notifications and not work orders. So you can really configure these based off those users. But as I drill into this specific plant, you'll now see this is where we start to configure the home screen itself. So again, these are those buttons that we looked at as far as create notification, create work order, create work list. And again, based off other screens that we've created or added, I can start to add these to the different layouts on my home screen. Okay. Now you'll notice when I drag and drop that particular screen to my home, I have a trigger here asking me, wait, you need to make a screen assignment now. Now, when we talk about workflows and standardizing those, this is the other conversation around that, right? How do we create those workflows? And again, you can see how simplistic it is from all right, if I create a service request or notification here, I want this particular user to go forward to the details so they can see or change or edit any of those details. Or I want this particular user to go back to the home screen after submission. So based off those users' workflows, we can also set that up in the mobile application. Because, again, they have certain access rights within your CMMS that we abide to, and we can never override those. But even within the mobile application, if we want to sort of create that workflow or business rule process, we can absolutely do that here from a very simplistic view. So as you can see here, I need to define what this particular action is going to be. So I can go ahead and push this user from the material search to the material details after that's completed. Okay. Now, there's a lot of other functionality within the admin configuration manager that we can provide at another time. But again, I think the main point is I want you to see is how simplistic it is to configure these. Because when we start to think about this on a bigger scale, right, you might start to roll out to one plant as a potential pilot, as an example, but not all plants have the same resources, have the same workflows, have the same really business model, right? But so how do you standardize on a single mobile platform, but have the flexibility to configure it based off the plants and the plant's roles and users themselves? And through this application, we make it extremely user-friendly to do that because, again, you don't have to have a developer. It's not customized. It's configured based on those roles.
Absolutely. And a great point. Of course, everyone, ideally, in a perfect world, we're going to have all plants, our corporation, doing things exactly the same way. But everyone on this call right now knows that is a pipe dream. So you need to be able to standardize where it makes sense, enable that easy standard workflow through the mobile application, but also keep it flexible enough to be able to meet different plants, different governing regions, and different needs of the nature of what you produce.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, in the webinar so far, we have again talked about a successful roadmap at a very high level. We've drilled down into some of the user functionality. We've talked about some of the IT functionality that we can have, right, that makes that implementation successful. But what does an implementation really look like, right? How do these features and functions make that implementation, or what impact can it have? And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit today as well here, where, this is a standard Prometheus group implementation. So you've probably seen variations of this over the years with different vendors that you may have talked to. If you were to add up all the time on the right-hand side, our average or typical implementation can happen in 6 to 8 weeks, which is typically defined by the user's testing requirements. Right? We can go faster or slower as needed. But once you make that decision to go with a mobile application, right, you're probably already waiting a significant amount of time for the budget. So that might be a year-long process just to get the budget. If you were to get into another customized app, that might be another 6 to 12 months of development. And again, you're going to want some return on that investment very quickly. So understanding what that implementation timeline is extremely crucial as well. Because as you kind of saw through some of our functionality and our solution too, of having that configurable, or having the best user experience in that configurable admin panel, that's going to allow you to implement an out-of-the-box solution very quickly in 6 to 8 weeks. And that's a huge differentiator in the market, rather than continuing to wait that extended period of time.
Absolutely. And actually, before we hop into the Q&A portion with the few minutes we have left, that directly relates to one of the questions that came in about ROI, those 3 ever important letters when discussing a project like this. It's about how do you prove ROI for going mobile and undertaking this project. And excellent question. I'm glad that this individual is already thinking about that in whatever stage of this process they're in. But it really depends on the business, depends on the company. We at Prometheus see things like maintenance productivity gains, obviously time saved, increased wrench time, a time decrease with an accuracy increase in your notifications or work requests if you're Maximo. Confirmations or time postings are going to be more accurate, which give you better metrics. But what's important is to establish a baseline of that wrench time, that downtime data. We're confident that with the Prometheus mobile app or with any mobile application that you choose, hopefully you can use that baseline to justify that return on investment. Another thing obvious, the first thing that probably should have come to my mind, is if you have a paperless initiative and you can view your documents in the mobile application, that's a no-brainer for time savings as well. So it goes back to the first slide about working with a trusted advisor. We can help you discuss these ROI. We know, we've seen it thousands of times before, what makes the ROI for a mobile application. So get a trusted advisor, and we can discuss that individually with everybody.
Okay, so that concludes the presentation portion of the webinar today. So want to take a little bit of time to dig into the questions and provide some responses. So
For sure, keep the questions coming. We're going to take a minute just to review, and we'll be back with you in just about 30 seconds. Excellent. So we got a couple one. Well, we got more than a couple. We appreciate all the questions, and we want to answer a couple real quick. One here is about the progress tracking, and along with different time entry options, it looks like specific to SAP for this question, such as CATs. But the progress tracking it sounds like you had a keen eye and saw the indication, a graphical indication on the work list of how done or how complete an operation is. We have a lot of different options for how we handle the time tracking and how we handle the progress tracking for that. Also, how time entry is handled, whether it's actuals in Maximo or Infor or confirmations in SAP, cross-application timesheets. So I want to address that question because it is very important. But the gist of what the end result would be is let's get on a call, contact us, or we'll reach out to you and discuss what your needs are. And then we can actually show you what exactly you may need or discuss different options. So appreciate the question. Progress tracking is of utmost importance, and just note that this is a flexible application to handle that.
Yeah, so one of the questions here was, can you annotate the image? So yes, we do have the capability to do that. And there's two ways to think about that, right? First of all, when you take an image that you want to upload to that service request notification or that work order, to maybe circle the area of where the issue is, or add a note into the picture, right? You can annotate that way, or on the back end, if you have a document that you're tracking, such as a work procedure, that you also need to annotate, we can also support that as well. So it really just kind of depends, again, what aspect you're looking for, but the easy answer is yes, we can, and that can be incorporated into it.
And that also answers another question we have, came in more recently. Can attachments be updated and saved back to a work order? Absolutely. We want to get that back to your core system, get that back to wherever you need it to be. And again, I feel like these questions are planned because they're coming in order of what topics are leading us to, but integration with SharePoint, 100%. We can integrate with any document management system. I know that's a bold statement, but that's the flexibility of the application. So to answer 3 questions in one, you can annotate that image, you can adjust that interactive PDF, whatever it may be. You can attach it back to a work order, back to a work request notification, and that can be integrated with SharePoint. Oh, here's a good one. This question always comes up. It's about device recommendations. What devices do you recommend for a typical plant environment? That is an excellent question. And first and foremost, the disclaimer is, we're a software company. If it runs full version of Windows, Android, iOS, it works with us, and that's fine by us. We do have minimum requirements, which are very on the low end due to the way that data is transmitted in very small data packets. We don't need a beefy device. That being said, we can use our industry experience, learn a little bit more about your requirements. Are you required to be intrinsically safe? If so, there's great Panasonic Toughbooks, ToughPads. There are companies that make iPads intrinsically safe. You can ship them off and they'll ship them back to you all sealed up and ready to go. But there's also lower duty requirements. So the short answer is, we really don't have a preference for what device you use, but ask us the questions, let us learn about how you need to use it, and we can either get you in touch or talk about what types of successful implementations we have. Well, I want to give everyone time to make it to their next meeting. We certainly appreciate everybody's interaction and attendance to this webinar. If you submitted a question that we could not address today, someone from Prometheus Group will be reaching out to you soon to answer. If you didn't submit a question but would like more information, let us know. We'll be glad to answer questions through this webinar forum or outside of it. If you'd like to see a personalized demonstration, that's our favorite thing to do. I will tailor it to your organization's needs, and we'd love to have that interactive demonstration. So special thanks to Brian, of course, and thanks to you all for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.